It's time now for County-Wide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Brad Miller as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives here in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's County-Wide.
Well, good day to you and welcome to the program. It is County-Wide. Brad Miller with you, and we're happy to welcome into studio again a voice you'll be very familiar with, DPS Sergeant G.R. Manera. We chat with him on our news programs very, very often. We're happy to have you in studio here,
Thank you
sir.
for having me.
Good to see you today. We're going to talk about what is going on out there, specifically in Yavapai County, GR in the Prescott office, and it's harvest time. So the marijuana is flowing up from Mexico and through our state to all points across the country, I think.
Yes, it
they
is.
go everywhere. And one of the main corridors and one of the main ways that is transported is right here through Arizona and through Yavapai County, our interstates, through Flag and just on. And DPS is out there, YCSO, all the guys and gals are out there trying to put a stop to all that. Harvest time. So you said it's like your garden's tomatoes are ready at a certain time of year. The marijuana crop is ready at a certain time of year. So
yeah, down in Mexico, I mean, it's just like growing tomatoes or anything in your garden. It's grown outside. It has a growing season. They harvest it, they package it, and this is the time of year between now and Christmas time. We see a big influx, especially coming out of Mexico and South America.
So a lot more on the road.
A lot more on the road.
Presumably there's going to be, do you guys kind of step up your patrols looking for this stuff?
We do on occasions, but there's so many, so many different ways to get it across the border, transport it across the country. We do run details out there on the interstates across the whole state. Our canines are more aware. They try to get out there more because their time is limited, but they try to get out on the highways a lot more during this time of the year.
It seems to me, and I know there's a million ways to do it, and every time you think of something, the bad guys will think of a way around it. It just seems like the pinch point for this would be at the border. And that somewhere along the way, now I know folks can get across it, and so product can get across it, and I get that, but it seems like we'd have more. And we see plenty of them, but it seems like we'd see a little more activity with this stuff being stopped before it ever got into the country. Or am I wrong, or does that happen? Or
a lot of it stopped down on the border.
Yeah.
Border Patrol, they're backpacking it across, they're flying it across with ultralights, they're tunneling it, bringing it across tunnels, cars, catapult. Yeah, they're doing anything they can to get this, but there's not a person every 100 yards on the border to watch everything that's going on.
Right.
They do have scouts. They watch where Border Patrol is. They watch where law enforcement is on the border. They drive by. They wait a while, make sure they're not coming back, and here comes a load.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
There is.
Good guys are
They're
bad.
very determined.
Is there any way to know, for every stop you make, and we hear about them, gosh, frequently, maybe once a week, we'll average probably a good-sized arrest where someone's carrying pounds of, 30, a sizable amount. Is there any way to know that for every arrest that's made successfully, how much gets on by that you just can't find?
We don't have an exact number, but as law enforcement, we estimate about 10 to 15% is what we're taking off the street.
Gosh.
Yeah.
So the vast majority is getting by. Do you ever get frustrated with that? Just think, why do we bother?
We do, but we do the best we can. I tell my unit and the units I work with, our focus is our communities.
Right.
What we get on the highways, that's helping somebody else's community. So maybe somebody won't get the drugs, or won't go into the schools, or won't go to a kid, and that's all we can do. Because if we let it get frustrating, and we're not going to want to do our job. So.
Right.
So you gotta stay the course and do what's right.
Keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
And stay after it, and especially in Arizona we have medical marijuana, and so it just kind of seems like the tone about marijuana is starting to change a little bit, and we'll see how that all plays out. But we started to get more. It seems like with more meth coming up again. It seems like that is kind of cyclical, and I don't know if that's a seasonal thing, but I know YCSO had a pretty good one. I think Coconino Sheriff, or maybe it was you guys up in Coconino County, had a pretty good meth arrest, or a couple of them.
Right.
Over by Winslow, there was a real big one here, just not terribly long ago. You seen more meth as well as marijuana?
We're seeing a lot more meth being transported out of our state.
Okay.
The one thing Arizona has done recently in the last 2.5 years is some mandatory sentencings.
Right.
For methamphetamine sales, transportation, manufacture. Doesn't matter if you've been arrested before or not, you go to prison.
And a 5-year minimum.
It's a 5, 10, it's a 5, 10, 15 scale. So we've seen meth use decreasing, especially in Yavapai County. The Yavapai County Attorney's Office has done a real good job prosecuting those cases. That sounds really good, but now we're seeing a huge increase in heroin use, cocaine use, the bath salts and spice. We saw that for quite a while.
Right.
So one's replaced by another, and that's kind of the sad part about it.
Pick your poison.
Yes.
I know a few years ago there was I think a court suit and a legal thing, and I was hesitant to use the word profiling, and you said that's okay because we still do that, we being DPS. But the problems become when it's based on race and things like that. But you say there's criminal profiling, and that's how a cop does his job the right way.
Right. Officers are trained through the academy to observe. And criminal profiling is if there's a guy dressed in all black hanging out in the shadows at somebody's house, that's
going to raise a question.
That's not right.
You bet.
And officers are trained to look at that. When they're out on the roads and stuff, they're looking for things or looking for indicators that are inconsistent with the normal motoring public.
Okay.
Those things may be, I drove from Detroit, Michigan to Phoenix, Arizona. I was there to see my sick and dying grandma, but I spent 30 minutes in Phoenix. Those are very common stories, and those things just don't add up to the officers out there on the side of the road, so they start investigating and digging more into this person or that person.
We hear that a lot. We, meaning Paul and I in the newsroom, and our listeners hear it then too. Especially if there's like two drivers, a guy driving and maybe a guy to spell him as they're on the road or whatever, two of them in the car or more. And why don't they get their stories straight? I mean, I know you're probably glad they don't, but you just think, and you think all of these dirt heads drive crappy cars with brake lights that don't work, and they go 90 miles an hour, and it's just like, I know we're not dealing with, road scholars here,
right?
But why don't they it seems like they take a little more time to kind of do it a smarter way.
Well, and the truth comes out easy, because you don't have to sit there and think about it. These guys will rehearse stories. Okay, we went to Phoenix to visit friends and, meet a girlfriend or whatever it is. They talk about it in general.
Right.
Our officers start talking to them, getting more specifics. Where did you stay?
Gotcha.
What's the girl's name? What does she do?
Gotcha.
They never think of those details. And even if they have, those are the minute details that, when you're trying to think of what did we talk about in the car? Those are the ones that get confused. Along with the fact that you're putting them under a little bit of pressure because they do have to think about it. They start beating up with sweat. You see the body language of real nervous behavior, and that's a big indicator for our officers out there on the road.
So it's your guys that are out on the side of the road talking to these folks.
Right.
Just good police work.
Yes.
Weeding through and I suppose when those stories start to deviate, that becomes the wedge where you're able to kind of get in there and see what's going on.
Right, and the motoring public, like we talked about before the show, everybody's nervous when they get stopped by the police. I am. I'm a police officer, and I've been stopped, and I don't like it. It makes me nervous. But it does. It makes you're the driver, and you're like, oh, I messed up.
Right.
But once the officer talks to you, he says, I need your license, registration. I'm going to write you a citation, a repair order, a warning, whatever it happens to be. Most people calm down because they understand they know what's going to happen. They're not happy about the ticket or whatever, but most people calm down. People who are transporting drugs, they could care less about the ticket, the warning, or the repair order, because in their mind, they're focused on the $100,000 that's hidden in the door panels, or the 200 pounds of marijuana that's in the trunk, and they just can't stop thinking about that, knowing that that's in there, and they never relax.
Yeah, and the officer has ways to find out, probably with a pretty good degree of certainty, if something is up. I can just see it, the way you've described it with the training and some experience, you can probably kind of figure pretty quickly what's up.
And it's not just drugs. I mean, if somebody's involved in any illegal activity,
yeah, sure.
I mean, we've had officers who've, done this, and they're talking to the people and it doesn't make sense.
Right.
It's not drugs. I mean, it may be bad checks or counterfeit money or whatever it happens to be, but criminal behavior, it makes people nervous, and the same things affect them.
We'll remember a year or two ago, a man who had committed a grisly double homicide in Prescott Valley was caught by one of your guys.
Yes. Going
up through Flag.
And the officer who caught him is one of our premier drug interdictors, and the same principles that he uses to take loads of drugs off the highway, I think saved his life that day.
Yeah. Caught a bad apple.
Yep.
We need to take a break. Great discussion. We'll talk more. I want to ask you about the consent search and what that's about when we come back with GR Manera from DPS. Back to Countywide after this.
Having a fire escape plan is very important to keep your family safe and together in the event of a fire. When you awake to the sound of a smoke detector and smoke in your room, don't stand straight up. Carefully roll off your bed and stay low under the smoke. If your door is shut, feel the door with the back of your hand. Slowly open the door if no heat is felt. Always stay low until you get to the outside of your home. Always have 2 ways out of your house and a specified meeting place somewhere outside your home. Home escape plans should be drawn up and rehearsed on a regular basis. This could be the difference between life and death if caught in a fire.
Here in northern Arizona and throughout Yavapai County, people count on Orkin Pest Control. With over 100 years of combined experience, nobody knows how to protect your home or your business from harmful or annoying pests like the Orkin Man. To start service, contact your Northern Arizona Orkin Pest Control. In the Verde Valley, call 567-5100 or Orkin Pest Control in the Prescott area at 775-8772.
Move over, AZ. Arizona's Move Over law requires you to move over or slow down when you drive past any vehicle pulled over with flashing lights. Any vehicle means emergency responders, roadside assistance, law enforcement, highway crews, even stranded motorists. Ignore the law and you could pay a fine. Remember, every vehicle, every time. Move over, AZ.
Sponsored by AZ in partnership with the Arizona Broadcasters Association and this station.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
Welcome back to the program. Again, Countywide. Our guest today, GR Manera, Sergeant GR Manera with DPS. Talking. It's harvest time. All the drugs are going through through Arizona and through the Southwest, that corridor up from Mexico to points all across, I guess, the United States. The consent search. Officer pulls somebody over. He's got suspicions. And we'll sometimes just ask the driver, do you mind if I have a look around the car?
Absolutely.
Tell me how that happens, what he needs to see to get to that point.
Again, our officers are trained in these indicators, and they believe something is afoot, something is afoul with this traffic stop. They've developed reasonable suspicion to believe that this person's involved in criminal activity.
Right.
And they'll ask them for consent to search.
Okay.
Whether that's granted or not, our officers will move on from there.
Okay.
But if it is granted, our officers give them a form, have them read it where it talks about their rights and the right to refuse consent.
Sure.
Goes through all the legal documentation.
Right.
It's signed by our officer, it's witnessed by another officer, and then the officers move forward to search the vehicle.
Why would anybody who has drugs in their car agree to a consent search?
I've been asked that for the last 22 years working this job. I really don't know.
You guys are glad they do.
Yeah.
But do they think they're going to get away with it? Or you don't know what they're thinking. I can't ask you that. But we see it in the news all the time.
Yeah, I think maybe they think if they grant consent, the officer may not really look. They may have it hidden very well. I mean, we're seeing a lot of compartments in vehicles where, I mean, it takes a mechanic to pull them apart in gas tanks and firewalls. They think that our officers aren't going to find it, and they want to appear as innocent, even though we've talked about the indicators. They're still their heart rate's still at 180 beats per minute. An hour into the traffic stop.
They're still thinking what you talked about earlier in the first segment. Where does it become? And maybe I'm not understanding the legalese of this. Where if an officer has probable cause and even without a consent can go ahead and say, well, I got to search this anyway because I've seen this, that, and that. Does that happen, or do you just, once the consent they deny and say no, you can't do it, then that's the final word, or how's that work?
Well, once probable cause is established, and it can be established through you've developed these reasonable suspicion and you've asked for consent, they may have denied it.
Right.
And they've requested a canine, or it's one of our canine officers that has made the traffic stop.
Right.
They can do an open air sniff of the vehicle without consent.
Okay.
They typically ask for that, but they don't have to. I mean, the air's free around the vehicle.
Yeah.
They'll walk the dog. If the dog alerts, that's deemed probable cause through the court system. If they develop other factors, like they see maybe a bag of meth sitting on the front seat, that's probable cause.
Sure.
Strong odor of marijuana
Obvious
from the
like
interior of the vehicle, that's probable cause.
Gotcha.
Because the vehicle's mobile and exigent, it has an exigent circumstance because it can leave.
Okay.
Officers can search that car right there on the side of the road.
Gotcha.
Based on the probable cause, without asking for consent.
I love these dogs. We've had them on the show, and they're handlers on the show, and it's just fascinating what that nose can do.
It's awesome.
Once that guy gets out there, that guy being the dog, and he makes that thing, and he makes some kind of what the officer's trained to recognize as a hit or a whatever. At that point, then there's going to be an arrest. There's going to be, or do you still have to get to the point where you find that before there can be an arrest, a seizure, and all that kind of thing?
Well, what happens is once the dog alerts, that gives you the probable cause to search the vehicle.
Okay, so
our officers will.
I get it.
If there's anybody left in the vehicle, they're asked to exit. They send them on the side of the road, or if they're acting a little strange, they may put handcuffs on them to detain them while they conduct the search. No arrest is made until actual criminal charges can be brought. Once they open the trunk, and there's the bales of marijuana in the back of the trunk, then the arrest can be made.
Or if, say, there's two people in the vehicle, and I know every case is different, so I'm not going to go through every single scenario we can think of, but if there's a front seat passenger and a driver, and you do find contraband of whatever, an illegal something, is the passenger going to get the same kinds of charges as, say, the driver, the operator of the car?
More times than not, yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
There is a constructive possession part of the law, which anybody in that vehicle can be held responsible for the items in that vehicle.
Gotcha.
We find typically when my unit, we do the follow-up investigation. We conduct the interviews of these people, go through the evidence and try to build the case further. A lot of times, nobody claims it.
Of course.
So we have no idea.
His.
Yeah,
no, it's his. I can see that.
Well, yeah, and that's a lot. So we file the charges. We book both passenger and driver into jail, and let the county attorney's office and the court system determine.
You bet.
Who is, and typically they're both convicted of the crime. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we hear about that. I always wonder how that kind of works. And you think about, like, in traffic violations, which I know is a whole different deal, it's incumbent upon the driver, owner of the car, operator of the car, and those kinds of things. And I didn't know how that kind of followed. We got to take another break. When we come back, I'm going to ask GR about decoy cars out there kind of trying to help the bad guys get away with it. We'll take a break. It's Countywide, and we'll be back right after this.
Having a fire escape plan is very important to keep your family safe and together in the event of a fire. When you awake to the sound of a smoke detector and smoke in your room, don't stand straight up. Carefully roll off your bed and stay low under the smoke. If your door is shut, feel the door with the back of your hand. Slowly open the door if no heat is felt. Always stay low until you get to the outside of your home. Always have two ways out of your house and a specified meeting place somewhere outside your home. Home escape plans should be drawn up and rehearsed on a regular basis. This could be the difference between life and death if caught in a fire.
Here in northern Arizona and throughout Yavapai County, people count on Orkin Pest Control. With over 100 years of combined experience, nobody knows how to protect your home or your business from harmful or annoying pests like the Orkin Man. To start service, contact your Northern Arizona Orkin Pest Control. In the Verde Valley, call 567-5100 or Orkin Pest Control in the Prescott area at 775-8772.
Move over, AZ. Arizona's move over law requires you to move over or slow down when you drive past any vehicle pulled over with flashing lights. Any vehicle means emergency responders, roadside assistance, law enforcement, highway crews, even stranded motorists. Ignore the law and you could pay a fine. Remember, every vehicle, every time. Move over, AZ.
Sponsored by AZ in partnership with the Arizona Broadcasters Association and this station.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
We welcome you back to the program. Fascinating discussion with DPS Sergeant G.R. Manera today. You said that you're seeing more decoy cars. Tell us what that's about.
There's been a trend in the last couple of years that where we see two vehicles traveling together, and whether they've picked up their dope in Phoenix or Tucson or Yuma or wherever it happens to be, two cars will be traveling together. When they do see a highway patrol officer or Yavapai County Sheriff's officer pull out as if they're going to look at one of the vehicles,
right,
the decoy car has nothing illegal in it. There's usually 1 to 4 people in the vehicle. As they see the patrol car coming up to them, they'll start committing traffic violations, almost reckless. They'll swerve within their lane, they'll follow too close, they'll speed up like they're fleeing.
Gotcha.
And the whole goal of that decoy car is to divert the officer's attention,
right,
get them stopped, and the drug load keeps going through.
Gotcha.
And it's a protective measure that they use to try to protect that load of contraband.
How do you is the officer, if he sees, it seems like if he sees reckless driving, it's incumbent upon him to stop. How do you kind of combat that? And you know, if you see that and you recognize it, how do you get Cheech and Chong coming up with the truck? How do you stop them too?
Well, the officers are trained. They're trained to look to see if vehicles appear to be traveling together. They may stop the reckless driver because there's times when that's an immediate threat to the rest of the motoring public.
Yeah.
And they'll call ahead to another officer up the road and say, hey, you need to look at this car. I believe it's traveling with this car. And we've had a lot of multiple stops, 2, 3, 5, 10 miles apart.
Right.
And we can tie those people back together through phone records. And
everybody in the decoy car is going to watch the load car go by.
Right.
You can just kind of see it.
Yeah. And once the stop and arrest or whatever's made on those things, we'll write search warrants for cell phones.
Right.
And driver of the reckless car has been talking to the driver of the dope car.
Right, right.
We've even seen it as obvious as the driver of the decoy car is the renter or registered owner of the previous car. Cars plated out of the same state.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Michigan or Ohio, New York, whatever it happens to be. Our officers are trained to look at that. If the behavior is not extremely reckless, they may just kind of let that car go, radio ahead to somebody else. Hey, this car was doing this, that, and the other. If you want to get a stop on it, and try to focus on the other car because they're trained to observe that and kind of be aware of what's going on.
Wow. Well, GR, we appreciate what you do out there. We hope you and all of the guys and gals with DPS and our law enforcement stay safe in this fight and continue on. There's a lot more to talk about. We'll have to save it for another time.
Right.
All right. We appreciate it, though. Sergeant GR Manera with DPS talking about it's harvest time and all of that stuff is flowing through, and they're out there fighting the good fight and trying to bring it off of the roads and off our streets. We thank you for joining us. It's Countywide. We'll see you again next time.
This has been County-Wide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Listen in each Tuesday and Thursday as we tackle the hot topics and talk to the decision makers across Yavapai County. That's County-Wide with Brad Miller and Paul David each Tuesday and Thursday on this Yavapai Broadcasting station.